Thanks again, Osman, for being here. The first question I wanted
Yeah.
to ask you, it actually pertains to your name. Your first and last names. What have you been told that they mean?
So I know from my first name, my my second uncle that was born, he was named after me. Um, but he didn't make it. He passed, shortly after he was born. Um, so my parents, they decided to choose my first name, uh, based off of that. And as far as Gallo is concerned, I wouldn't be able to answer that actually. I haven't really gotten too much about that. Um, but I know for sure, like my name, I get a lot of um, I get a lot of different individuals that ask me, "Hey, where does it come from?" Like it's Middle Eastern. I'm like, well, no, it's not Middle Eastern, right? My parents are from El Salvador, so that's where they're from, and I was born here. So basically, they gave me that name more so because of my uncle.
Interesting. Yeah, I never asked you about it before, but I also thought it was interesting because I've always been familiar with the name Osman as being Arabic, but you're Latino, so
Mhm.
that piqued my
Yeah,
curiosity.
yeah,
But
no, for sure.
you said this one really incredible thing one time, which was we're so authentic, we don't need to brag. And I love that statement because it's true. And I want to ask you, what's the psychology behind that truth? We're so authentic, we don't need to brag.
I would say like as you start to gain more experience, doing psychology work, um, you begin to just be yourself, Like I would say that, being a therapist, every client that I see, I'm usually the same, I'm not any different. Um, so whenever I say like be authentic, right? I don't have to work harder, right? This is just something that is natural for me, No matter what person I see in front of me, like I'm always going to be myself, right? Um, Now when it comes, outside of being a therapist, right? I'm also a dad or husband, uh, and I'm also a son, right? So in a sense, right, I do present a lot of those things, even as in personal. Um, but as you go into personal life, right, there's always like different, um, I would say, there's like different nuances, that you go through, or that you are that dynamic, right, relationship that you have with your family, or there may be times where it's not as maybe not as authentic, right? Just because it's a personal, right? But I know on the psychological side, like the professional side, this is just who I am, right? I don't think, but I do think that overall, generally speaking, like that's what I consider myself. So,
Yeah. You know, what's fascinating is what you said there about you don't have to work harder when you're authentic. And I think that's interesting because I think sometimes subconsciously, I feel like I have to work harder to present my authentic self. And I'm not entirely sure how to explain it, but I think it's something akin to managing appearances. Have you ever had an experience like that where it is kind of challenging to be your authentic self?
yeah, there is at times, right? I mean, even though I'm being authentic and I'm being me, the person that I'm speaking to could very much be experiencing their own challenges, right? Mentally. Um, so a lot of times it's not even me, it's more so them. And I learned that over time, right? But I know at the beginning, whenever I was learning more about relationships and stuff like that, I started I started to get that feeling where, yeah, maybe I do have to work a little bit harder in the sense where I have to figure out how to fix the problem, right? When in reality, that's the problem that the person carries. All right, so like, okay, so a good example would be in the Four Agreements, right? The book talks about how
Great
to not
book.
take things, yeah, how to not take things personal, right? It talks about that all the time. Um, and being impeccable with your word. So yeah, that's your authentic self, and don't take anything personal, right? So if somebody were to come in front of you and just say "f you," right, and say you are a piece of whatever, right? Then if you're following, if you start to see that person more so as they are going through their own internal difficulties, then yeah, I mean, that's what they are. That's their world. That's what they see, right? So I started to realize that, when people are like that and they start to say things that are unpleasant, it's not has, a lot of times it doesn't have to do with you. It's more so how they are internalizing things, right? So I hope that answers that question.
No, I like what you said, and I have a friend, or actually, a better example. Uh, when I'd go to the mosque with my dad, there's always somebody who's stirring up an argument, and I'm sure that's like that with church politics or any religious place, where somebody's just mad about something. I remember telling my dad, that person right there, they have unfinished business to attend to somewhere. Because all that anger is being redirected in the wrong direction. It needs to be channeled somewhere else. But I've seen that, akin to what you're saying, that anytime someone is just being so negative and making a show of it, they have unfinished business to attend to somewhere. And that's something that one of my friends, he opened my eyes to as well. That we all have unfinished business to attend to somewhere.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it could resort to violence. You know,
Yeah,
like, you see a lot of that nowadays, where things
yeah.
could turn deadly. But in reality, it's just an internalization, right, of how people process things, right? Um, so I like to see things more like I would say from outside looking in, right? That's kind of how I am, right? So if I have somebody that's having a bad day, or if I have somebody that is trying to cut me off in traffic or something like that, like I just let them be, right? I just let them do their thing. And I know that I don't, like, feeding into that is just going to make things worse, right?
I remember one of the
So,
observations I made in my life was the one place I never take anything personally is traffic. I do not mind if someone cuts me off, and I don't really care either if I cut them off. It's the one place where I don't take anything personally. It's funny. It's funny to me.
yeah, yeah, no, I mean, that's probably the best thing that you can do, right? Because even even if it is like a competition where you're trying to win, like what do you gain from that? You don't really gain anything. Um, so the person can win, they can feel arrogant, they can feel like they are on the top of the world. Great, you know. You feel that way, right? I'm going to let you be, and you internalize things how you want. So
Yeah. Going back to the authenticity thing, I think what I think it might have something to do with being scared to offend. And I think sometimes it's healthy to be brave enough to offend. Not like in a malicious way, but more so to stand your ground about something. I feel like you probably have seen a lot of clients like that where maybe they're afraid to offend or share something vulnerable about themselves because they're afraid of the wrong answers, maybe. Is that something that you see commonly?
yeah, maybe sometimes they kind of lean more on me to be able to answer their their problems, I guess. Maybe that's a good way to put it. So when they have that dependency of me resolving those problems, then they don't have to do a lot of the work, right? Um, so at times, I have people that are like that. I think you may have actually seen that plan too, where they'll say, "Oh, I'm paying you the big bucks, so you got to fix the problems." So I think, even though that may come out of sarcasm, right? And a lot of times it's sarcasm, right? But sometimes it could be like subconscious too, where it's like, hey, we need to fix my problems, you know? So I started
This
to
is a
notice that tendency.
transaction.
Yeah, like I had like subconsciously, it's like you are supposed to fix my problems. Maybe when it comes to me, it doesn't feel that way in a sense, right? But I always go back to saying like, I'm not here to fix your problems. I'm here to observe your life. I'm here to help you understand what is making you do these things, right? And a lot of these things can stem from uh, more so inferiority within themselves, right? Um, and stuff like that, to where they just go with emotions. They don't really dictate what direction they want to go. So I'll give you an example. So like kind of like the set of the sail, right? Like, that can kind of get you going.
Say that part again.
Like the set of the sail, right? You can decide where you want it to
Wait,
set it
I
at.
couldn't hear you. What is that?
The set of the sail, like when you're
The
on a
set of
boat,
the
right?
cell?
Right. Like you can go south, you can go west, you can go
Oh,
east, you can go
okay.
north, right? But it's like, if you see something to your left where maybe it looks pleasant, then you're going that direction, right? But you don't really you're not really deciding in it like for yourself. You're deciding because that looks pleasant, you know? And then maybe on the east, you may see something on your east where maybe that looks pleasant too. So you go that direction as well. But it's like if you choose to go your direction because that's how you feel about it, and you go north and you're confident about it, then you know what you have set for yourself, right? So a lot of times I work with individuals where they don't know what direction they're going. They're just going this direction because things may seem nice that way. But the very truth is that they're just doing that because they see that there's something pleasant there, right? But the reality is like they have to be fulfilled themselves, and then they have to choose that direction they're going to go, right? It's kind of like you could be as happy as you make up your mind to be. So right now, you can choose to be happy, like no matter what, no matter how your life is, right? So if somebody says, "Oh, I'll be happy whenever I do get, that job, or I do make that money, or I do get this relationship," right? But the reality is that you have to be happy first before all those things come to you, or you have to attract that into your life, right? So I'm a firm believer of that. So sometimes people try to lean towards me in the sense that they want to find that happiness, right? My job is to help them unlock that for themselves, right? So it's a lot of it's a lot of digging, a lot of further assessing, right? For them to be able to identify that.
What's your greatest advice to someone on attracting what they desire into their life?
Hmm. So a lot of times people say, I'll be fulfilled whenever I get this job, or I'll be fulfilled whenever I find this relationship, right? So a lot of times people have to already, um, what's the word? It's like right, it's coming right around the lips. But they have to manifest it. There you go. They have to manifest it into their lives, right? So like if somebody is looking to be married and to start a family and have kids, then they have to start seeing those things before that even happens, right? So like an example, let's say a single man has been single for so long and he's in his 30s and he still hasn't found the person for him, right? he has to be able to decide that if this is really what he wants, he has to become that, right? So what that means is that he's already seen his future ahead of him. He's being optimistic about it, but he's also working towards that too. So what does that mean? Well, it has to do a lot with the character that he is, right? It has a lot to do with how he's working towards himself. What is he doing for himself to be able to succeed, right? So like, um, what is he doing professionally, right? What is he doing with his health? What is he doing in his current relationships that he has? You know, how is he giving value to other people? You know, so there's a lot of different components that people have to work on for them to attract those things into their life, right? So like, and I will say this too on a professional side, right? Let's say this person wants to be an engineer. They have to start imagining things already as if they already have it before they achieve it, right? But of course, you can't just sit around and hope that you become an engineer, right? So that means, you know, you start to visualize those things, right? But what are you doing to help you get there, right? What schools have you applied for? How much are you devoting to studying, to preparing for school, for passing your tests, passing your classes, moving closer to that degree so that you can become an engineer, all right? And the work doesn't stop there, right? You still have to find placement somewhere, right? But all that comes the moment that you start to visualize that in your future, you know, like how things are going to be in the future. So I think that that's the best way to go about, um, with the question that you asked, where if someone wants to um, see that for themselves, they just have to see it and then they have to work towards it.
Some people, they shoo away manifesting and they think, oh, that's just superstitious talk and
Mhm.
it's just mumbo jumbo. What's your response to that? Where's the reality of manifesting?
So I always go back to like how common negativity is or pessimism, right? Um, I think it's easy for people to see the bad things out of everything, right? Like how the economy is, how how crappy the president is, how much his job is paying me, right? They're not paying me enough. Um, how my relationship is, right? How terrible it is. Like it's easy for them to talk about those things, right? And people feed into that stuff too. It's easy for people to feed into that. So they get involved in that environment, you know? Like it's kind of like a disease, like a very infectious disease. Like somebody can contract it easily. So the moment someone is negative, like people are attracted, like people just gravitates towards that, And it just continues to spread like a disease and it's deadly, right? It's very deadly. Um, So when people say that, you don't want that in your life, is because that's they're used to what's going on in their lives, right? They're used to that negativity. They're used to being dealt the cards that they don't want, you know. So it's very like in a sense, right? People may think it's weird to think positive, to think that their life is going to be better in the future, because they're so accustomed to see the negativity. They're so accustomed to see things the way that they have seen them in the past, you know. So for them to change that and to start seeing things in a positive light, like this is coming from like a different dimension. This is like, why am I thinking this stuff? Like this doesn't make any sense. This is ridiculous. Be realistic, right? That's what they always say. You know? So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are like that. And I would even tie that too with mental health. Like when people are depressed, they're very negative. They're um very much pessimistic about their future. They're hopeless, that life is doesn't have a future, that things are not really gonna move forward. And then they take their lives, right? It's very unfortunate. But I mean, the reality is it all starts with the brain. It all starts how people think. Um, So the brain is a very powerful organ. I would say it's the most powerful thing within ourselves is the way that we think, you know. Um, and anybody has the potential to flip that, no matter what their circumstances are.
There's this movie
Um,
that came out a couple years ago called Dungeons and Dragons, and I loved that film so much because it was the first time I saw in a movie where the protagonist, played by Chris Pine, even though he hits rock bottom, he doesn't let go of his optimism. And even his gang of friends, they gang up on him. And he still remains positive. You know, they all want to give up. They're like, hey, you suck. This didn't work, blah, blah, blah. And he's still positive and he still persists. And he's like, I'm still optimistic. We're going to do this. It's going to work. And I loved it because it was the first time in a film that I saw somebody who kept holding on to their optimism. Because usually what happens is the protagonist, they hit rock bottom, they're sad, they're dejected, and then, they have to have a mentor visit them or, some ghost or someone visits them to uplift them, motivate them. And that's cool and everything. But again, in that movie, Dungeons and Dragons, was the first time I saw a character who just had it all within himself. It's like, it's here. I'm not letting go of that. Like, I have the optimism. We can do this. And so
yeah,
you're right. Optimism, it can really, really change things. It can really flip the
yeah,
script.
totally can, you know. And sometimes, life events may happen to where it may flip things for them. Right? While that is nice and all, right? I think that relying on something like that to happen is is naive. You know, like I'll give you an example. I don't know. Maybe lottery is a little too far-fetched, right? But like, okay, yeah, I'll give you the lottery example. So like if somebody were to do a scratch off because they're hoping that they can change their life, right? And this very much does change their life, you know. They win the lottery, millions of dollars, a lot of money, right, at once. And because they didn't work hard, because they didn't do all the work to help them get there, more often than not, people lose that money, because they don't really know how to keep that. They've never seen that in their life. So all they're gonna know is how to spend it. Uh, Next thing you know, they're kind of back to where they were, you know. So I think in a sense, right, you kind of have to become um, somebody, you know, not just in terms of finances, right, but more so like as a person. You have to become this person for you to get what it is that you want in life. You know?
You have to meet the requirements.
Yeah, exactly. So like, okay, so there's this other saying too, right? It's like if you want to become a millionaire, what do you have to do to like it's not about making $1 million, but who do you need to become a millionaire? Nobody ever talks about that. They just talk about how much money they want to have. But who do you have to become to be able to become a millionaire? And what do you have to do to keep that?
And what's the answer to that?
Well, I would say, I mean, there's a lot of general ways to answer that question, right? But I think more than anything, from what I've gathered, right, is that you have to find, okay, so I'm gonna take it back. So I listen to a lot of Jim Rohn, a lot of Jim Rohn. I listened to a lot of his audios. I've read some of his books, but he mentioned that um, there's oh man, it kind of just slipped my mind. But there was this one part where he was talking about where he said that uh, I know self-discipline is one of them, right? But you also have to find something to where it provides value, right? So bringing more value to the marketplace. There you go. That's one of the same, right? So if you work a job where you're making $20 an hour and you're trying to make $1 million, right? There's only so much you can do making $20 an hour, right? But if you become that person to where you're making twice as much as that, which is $40 an hour, then how much higher do you go on that ladder, right? And then if you do something more, or you say, okay, maybe I can triple that or quadruple that or even 10 times that, right? To where you're making $200 an hour. Like, what do you have to do to become that, you know? And then you just continue to get multiply that, multiply that, multiply that. But now I would say, right, working working as an employee, right? I mean, there's only so much you can do as an employee, right? Um, Even like a surgeon, right? Just like top of the food chain, right? Even a surgeon doesn't make $1 million. I think a surgeon probably makes anywhere from like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like maybe somewhere in the 300 to 400,000 a year, right? So even a surgeon can't make that kind of money. Right? So a millionaire is described as someone who brings in one 1,100 one one 1 million worth, right? 1 million, 1 M. So and that's every year, at least. So everybody brings some value to the marketplace, right? But it's, I guess, how much value are you bringing into the marketplace? How much value are you doing? How much are you valued in bringing, right? So I think that would be the best way to describe it, like how much value you're bringing to the marketplace, you know?
Yeah, and I
So,
like how you emphasized, keep asking yourself the questions because it reminds me of something that Alan Watts had once said, which was problems that remain persistently insoluble should always be suspected as questions asked in the wrong way. So, in other words, ask yourself the right questions. And another thing, Matthew McConaughey said something like, ask yourself all the questions you want, just make sure you answer. And I think that is the part that's easier said than done. Make sure you answer. And I've been guilty of that too. I've asked myself so many questions, but maybe the answer isn't always there. And so that leads me to ask you, in your experience, what is the common pattern? Why don't people do what's good for them?
do you mean like, in what sense? Like going after that education, going after that career that they dreamed of? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like many times in life, and I'm sure many, many humans, if not all, have experienced this, where the pipeline truth has been laid out for them. You know, here's the series of actions you can take to get where you want. Here is the solution to your problems, right? Because sometimes it is that easy. Here is the solution to your problems. But what is it that prevents a human being from giving into that good, from taking the right actions, from doing what they need to do? And I know it always depends, right? The answer will always vary. But is there a common pattern you've seen to self-sabotage?
Mhm. So if we want to use this more as a in a general way, right? Um, I think it has a lot to do with con- conformity. I think that's the word, right? People being comfortable where they are, um, settling for a mediocre lifestyle, right? Um, so like they'll see somebody maybe that they know or somebody that they don't know, where they're so successful, right? They have they have the family, they have the career, they have the financial status that they're looking for, right? And then they look at them and they compare themselves to them, and they say, "Oh, no, they may have had some nice card dealt to them, or something like that." Um, or they may say, "Well, those aren't for those people. Those aren't meant to be for me. Those type of things aren't meant for me." And like you talk about the self-sabotage, right? So these type of things are not meant for me. Or it could be, well, I could do all these things, but I'm okay where I'm at right now, right? Like I'm okay, like I'm just gonna be vulgar, right? I'm okay with meeting women and just having a good time, not really going after taking the extra step, right, to build a foundation. right? And maybe the career, right? Maybe if I want to actually be financially stable and I want to have something that I can really, really look forward to, maybe working this job where they're paying me less, like it's not hard. I'm just here working, making this, and I get to go home at 5 o'clock every day. I have the weekends off, and life is good. In a sense, right? Life is good. So they're comfortable where they're at. Um, or maybe in the whole health and fitness industry, right? When people say, "Oh, on January 1st, I'm gonna go start working out and I'm gonna go start to be healthy," right? Um, but man, that food is so good at that restaurant, you know.
I've been guilty of
Um,
that.
I, well, me too. I think we've all been. Um, I want to eat that really comfort foods. I want to order takeout today. I want the food to come to me. I don't want to cook. I don't want to spend that time making meals at home, right? Or the gym is a lot of work. I'm really tired. I don't want to go to the gym after work. Like, I feel like I deserve a break, right? I feel like whatever the excuse is, right? And then they don't exercise, right? And then they don't eat healthy. What happens in the future, right? They start to develop health problems. They're overweight. On worst case scenario, their life expectancy is not as long, you know?
Yeah.
So,
We're like librarians who have mastered the catalog of excuses. We know which
yeah.
ones. We know which ones.
And I have clients that are like that. They have that mediocre type of mindset and they have so much potential. They're very good
Yeah.
workers. They do a lot of good work, for their companies, but in a sense, they're okay with where they're at because I wouldn't say they're living good. I think they're just kind of like stable, maybe like on average. If
Yeah.
something were to hit the fan, then yeah, I mean, it would probably be pretty bad. But as long as nothing bad happens like that, where we take a financial hit, then we're okay. And that's what a lot of people, that's the way a lot of people think.
The way you laid it
So,
out, it's making me think, emotions are like narcotics sometimes. They can really
mm,
dope you up into thinking a particular way, and that can lead to the mediocrity. And if my analogy has any merit to it, how do you deal with those narcotics that we all have within us?
I think it has a lot to do with, like I said, right? You have to have the ability to dream about having something better for yourself, because there's always something out there that's better for you. But I think that, at least in America, a lot of people are very much not ambitious. A lot of people don't really want more for themselves. Well, they do, but they're not willing to put in the work for it. Or at least they want to convince themselves that their lives are just enough. And people are willing to live like that. So, um, nobody can force anybody to want to have a better life for themselves. They have to actually decide and commit to that. You know. So I'll give you an example. This is personal, right? So when I went to the military and I got out, I took a break for a year from work. And I told myself, I need a break. I've been working for so many years. I got out of the military. I'm a civilian again. I go back to my parents and I don't have any responsibilities, right? Other than, the little bills that I have, because I wasn't paying rent or anything. So I told myself, all right, you know what? Let me give myself a year break and then I'm going to decide what I'm going to do with my life. Right? By the time I hit the 3 months, I was ready to start working again. Like I was done. I couldn't do it anymore. Right? You're talking about someone, in their late 20s, where they have a lot of life to live, a lot of purpose, like in a sense. So yeah, I started looking for work and I picked up a job, back to what I used to do. I was a pharmacy tech. So I started doing that type of work as a civilian. And I got a good job. They paid me good, you know, and the job itself wasn't that hard. And not only that, but my boss was not micromanaging me whatsoever. I had the freedom to do pretty much whatever I wanted in that job, you know. And then eventually they started having quotas, right, that we had to meet. So it added a little bit of pressure, but not too much. But we were still able to do whatever we want. Like we were on our phones whenever we wanted to. We would have a very friendly relationship with our peers and my boss. And I just started going through that cycle, man, where I was like, man, I know I want something better for myself. You know, like I love that I feel comfortable. I love that I have like this comfort zone where I have a job that pays me decently, and that I don't have too much to worry about with this job. I have a stable paycheck. My job is like 20 minutes away, probably, and I'm good. Like I feel good. But I knew there was something out there better for me. No. I just had that feeling. So
You
yeah,
didn't
I
ignore the
went.
hunger.
No, I mean it took me a while, I would say, but after 5 years of being there, not 5 years, maybe like 3 years, I started to look into schools. Like, how can I obtain my master's? How can I focus on a career that I really want to do? I started to notice later on in life that I really like to work with people. So I wanted to have a human relations job. I didn't want to be a teacher, right? Because I know how not only financially, right, but also like the burnout, mental burnout that you get from being a teacher. I think there's just a ceiling there that's very low when it comes to being a teacher. Um, so that I didn't do that. There was also nursing. I didn't want to do medical because I've always been bad at medical in school. I feel like part of it too was just me not wanting to go through those type of challenges, mentally. So then I was like, all right, so there's counselor and social worker. So I was like, all right, I want to be a counselor. I think I would like talking to people. So I went and got my master's and became a therapist. And I worked as a therapist for a couple of years. Um, I started working in district counseling. I was an intern there. And then I got a position as an LPC associate. So I started getting hours. And then because I needed to get more hours, I started working for the Harris Center. So I picked up a full-time job there, worked there for about 11, 12 months. I liked what I did as a therapist, right? But the burnout was just immense. Like it was quick. But by the time I was there for like 5 to 6 months, I was already like, this is too much.
Yeah. You were a
So
melted candle.
yeah, no. And I want it. And then again, even after I had my dream, right? Like after I achieved my dream to become a therapist, I still wanted more for myself. That was not enough. So I literally decided, pay attention to the words that I'm saying. I literally decided that I wanted to open my own private practice. Literally. I sat down with my wife. Well, actually, no. We went on vacation in September 2023 to Mexico. I felt like I would be able to take a break, you know, and then go back to work and I'll feel good. I'll feel good. I'll be like, all right, I took a mental break. I'm ready to get back to action. I feel like the burnout, I was able to kind of like relieve it. And I'll go back and it's the same shit. It's like, I don't want to be here. I'm starting to hate this. So I sat down with my wife and I said, all right, I told her, I said, let's I want to do this. I want to open my own private practice. I think it's time. So we literally decided to open our own private practice. And it took a lot of work. It did. But I literally like walked out of that job and, and leaned a lot on our faith to make everything work. And it did. It did. So I think part of it too, right? People are scared that they're going to fail. So they don't go after that stuff. They don't chase their dreams because they feel they have a feeling that they're going to fail.
And I think a good
So
indicator that you should chase your dream is when you're no longer scared to fail.
yeah. Or even you can say, you know what? I might fall down. but it's not how I stay down on the ground or how I get back up and keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you for sharing your story, man.
yeah.
There's, for a long time, I've had a great fascination with Alexander the Great. And in one of Robert Greene's books, he has this one part where he talks about Alexander. And the point he emphasizes is Alexander's father was King Philip. Alexander had a wonderful life on paper. You know, you live in the palace, you've got ease, you've got every desire you could want, you have it. But Alexander quickly recognized in his youth, I have to carve my own necessity because if I don't, I'm just gonna like, this is it. This is my life and that's it. So he didn't ignore his hunger. He paid attention to his ambitious feelings and he carved his own necessity. And that's what allowed him to expand as he did. Otherwise, he would have just stayed in Macedonia and that would have been it. And I frequently think about that. You have to carve your own necessity. And in fact, after reading that, I don't know if I ever told you this, but my friend and I, we have a band, and I named the band Necessity because of that. You have to carve your own necessity.
So what is your role in the band?
I write songs and sing them.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
You have live shows and stuff?
No, we just released an album, just one album, 18 original tracks, and I can't say anything else for the future right now.
Okay. Well, hey, that's all right though. You're
Yeah,
able to do something like that. That's really cool.
thank
Um,
you. But
yeah.
I brought that up, by the way, because I wanted to ask you, in your story, it seems like the similarity is you carved your own necessity as well. You didn't ignore the hunger and you wanted more, you wanted more. But where does that come from? How does a person carve their own necessity when they don't have to?
Wow. I think it's like you become tired, sick and tired of being sick and tired. You know, that's a very important place to be in. Um, I would also say disgust. Like, look at where my life is right now. I don't say this like in a way of like diminishing you or degrading you, right? But I think in a sense, it's an important position to be in because you're so ready to get out of that place. And you do get out of that place, man, because you don't ever want to go back to that place. Some people, they don't become sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like I mentioned earlier, they know that there's something better out there, but because this, wherever they're at right now is comfortable and it doesn't push them, then they're going to stay where they are, you
Yeah.
know?
There's this thing in the Muslim tradition where depression is a soldier of God and he's there to get you out of your rut, to motivate you. I remember when I heard that, I was like, whoa. Because before my perspective was depression's a demon. It's like, no, it's a soldier of God. It wants you to move. I was like, wow, that really flipped the script for me.
Yeah, most definitely, you know? But I just think that when people get sick and tired of that, of being sick and tired, like they are ready to make that move. And I know for me, that's where I was in October, you know? And I mean, and of course, it's always good to have a good mentor, right, to kind of help you along the way. But, but we opened our business under us. We opened our bank account under us. We did all the logistics on our own. And the only thing that we really have ties with him now is just making sure that we run our practice similar to how he runs his. So a lot of the things that we do here is like just an example of what he's brought to us, you know. So I think too, right? Like it's good to have a mentor, like just in general. Like if you want something bigger for yourself, you want to find that person that's already there so that they can guide you and help you go that far, you know. And you can use this in all aspects of your life, you know. It doesn't have to be like from my perspective, right? But like I just mean like if you want to be a good husband, go find somebody that is a good husband, you know. If you want to have that good job, find somebody that's been in the industry for years and you can learn from them, you know. Um, if you want to be fit and healthy, then find somebody that can walk you along the way, you know. A lot of them charge nowadays, right? But there's a few out there that's willing to help, even though, you know, even if they don't make anything from it. So,
You
yeah,
know, I really enjoyed this conversation, Usman. I appreciate the things you brought to the table because they were very insightful. So thank you for
yeah,
sharing. I was
of
wondering, do you
course.
have any closing thoughts? Anything you felt like you wanted to say, we didn't get a chance to, or something on your mind that you wanted to express?
I am looking at opportunities where I can be of value to others, right? Um, and I think mentoring is also something I wanted to pick up on, even if it's like doesn't have any ties, financial ties to it. Like I have been wanting to do something like that. I just never got to the serious phase of it, you know. Um, because I talked to my wife about it, you know, we went back and forth about doing something like this. And I think it's more so the liability part, you know, we want to make sure that we're protected, you know, and that they don't have any type of expectations from us or anything like that. So, so yeah, that is something that we're also looking to do, you know, like pro bono, you know, and we'll see how that goes. We'll see if that brings any success to us. And, you know, maybe that could be something that could be, you know, like a extra layer there. So, but no, that's all I have.
Cool, cool. Well, I just wanted to close off with two quotes I had written down from you that I've thought about a few times every once in a while. It's good to have good tears. That was one. Plain words, but so true. So thanks for saying that. And then the other one, you can't expect her to own up to her own stuff. If she does, she does. That's out of your control. And again, it might sound simple, but it's so true. And I think that goes beyond relationships. It goes to beyond romantic relationships. It goes to connections with different people. That
Um,
whatever a person does, you got to leave it up to them. If they own up to it, they do. If they don't, they don't. And you just got to stick to yourself and just move on.
or
So, yeah, it's been wonderful speaking this month. Thank you for being here.
yeah, no, thank you for having me, Omer, and I look forward to what 2026 has in store for us.
Yeah, I suppose till next time, man.
Yeah, till next time. Thank you.